Hello and welcome to episode 266 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, smoke from our local wildfires near us on the Canadian prairies ruined a hike for one of our listeners in Switzerland. Now I feel extra bad about that time I burned my dinner on the barbecue.
The world's banks are still increasing their investments in fossil fuels despite promising not to. Said a spokesperson for the world's banks, "I'm sorry, we're evil. We just can't help it." And then they raised interest rates on credit cards by another 2%.
The Clean Energy Air Quality Project marches forward. This week, we've detected pollution from our landfill. Turns out garbage dumps are foul, disgusting places. Who knew?
The UK is bracing for a heat wave this week, right when I'm planning to travel there. When reached for comment, King Charles said, "We're relying on Brian Stockton from the Clean Energy Show to cool things down. Because he's so cool." Aw, thanks, Charles. Long live the king!
All that and more on this royal edition of the Clean Energy Show. And also this week, we got lots more stuff. It's a packed show. We'll have to move fast. Nepal is skipping gasoline and going directly to electrified transportation. Your letters and the lightning round later in the show.
Yeah, lots more. But yeah, in about 10 days, I'm planning to travel to London in the UK. And there's a report this week from Bloomberg about a heat wave that is about to blast London. They're going to get temperatures above 30 Celsius. And, you know, it's classified as a heat wave when it gets this bad in London.
Wasn't it a heat wave last time you were there? I'm seeing a correlation here.
It was pretty warm. It was high 20s. And I know in 1994, and I've probably mentioned this before, in 1994, I was able to travel through Europe for Utopia Cafe, that TV show that I worked on. And at that time, that was the hottest summer in Europe. And people were still quite surprised by it and not sure how to deal with it. And every hotel was too hot.
They're going to pay you not to go there. They're going to send money to you and say, stay home.
Yeah. But, you know, anyway, they've had many record-breaking hot summers in Europe since then. And it was, kind of like high 20s and sunny last time I was in London. And it looks like it's going to be more of the same and perhaps even hotter.
Well, apologies to our UK listeners, because obviously we know the problem. It's global warming, but it may also be Brian Stockton.
Yeah, it might be.
So this is week 2 of me having an air quality monitor for the Clean Energy Show in my backyard in Regina, Canada, near industry here in the north end of the city. And I've been studying the results. And though it was for the first few days of the week that has passed, it was very smoky. So there's lots of static in my data, if you will. And yeah, so wind direction plays a major role.
Yeah, because you're mostly interested in the pollution from industry, but of course we have these forest fires which are blowing in on certain days and kind of mucking everything up.
So there's 2 stations that are important to me in our city. One is downwind from the refinery from me. Like if you keep going on a line, that's got a station in the northwest part of town. So I want to see how far it reaches there. But there's also CTV/CKCK TV, our local CTV affiliate TV station on the western edge of the city. It is downwind, and I noticed its readings going up with a north wind. It would require a northwest or north-northwest wind to be downwind from the refinery, but I noticed its readings going up with a north wind, and I looked, and our landfill is north of it by almost as far as the refinery. And I wondered if landfills pollute in the way that, wildfires do and other, particulate matter. And the answer is yes. So I'll have that later in the show. I'll get into that because this is new to me. And often on the show, we discover things and share it with our listeners. And maybe some of our listeners are very well aware of these things already, but we're going to share it anyway. And yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And we have breaking news from Bloomberg, and they are covering the International Energy Agency's oil announcement, their new energy oil outlook, and they are saying China's oil demand will stop growing earlier than expected, and it's going to top out in 2027. That's 2 years from now? Yeah. Maybe a year and a half, depending on how you look at it. So that's China's oil demand will stop growing earlier than expected, and worldwide oil use will peak only 2 years after that in 2029. And, everyone around here thinks, 2040s, late 2040s. No.
Well, and I'm kind of disappointed in those numbers because it always
Yeah.
seems like we're about to hit peak use of oil, and then it always seems like it's still a year or two away. So to me, those numbers are disappointing, but I guess for most people around the world, it would be a surprise.
Well, they tend to be conservative. I think when we look back at things, they tend to be conservative from the IEA. The IEA predicts that global oil demand growth will slow to a trickle in the next few years, with consumption at a maximum of 105.5 million barrels a day in 2029. So if you are listening to the show within 7 days of us recording it, you can go and see a gift link to that article on Bloomberg. No paywall. It's on our Patreon page for everyone. You don't even need an account. Just go to our public page there, and you can click on the link and read that story. Of course, there will be other sources for the story, but Bloomberg tends to be one of the best, for stuff like this.
Yeah.
So the IEA predicts that global oil demand will slow to a trickle. And I like to hear those words, but I think no one around here is going to believe that for a second, but it's true. And also, just whenever you read reports about Chinese automakers cutting prices and expanding markets and opening stores, you know that things are brewing, that there's a rumble on the horizon, and that's going to spell difficulty for them. The agency sees limited need for extra barrels from OPEC Plus as rivals expand. So OPEC is that sounds like lower oil prices on, regardless of what happens in Iran. But I've come to the conclusion that high oil prices are good for the interim for the transition, because they've been trying to get them down, right? And then this conflict has raised them again.
Everything in this is a tricky balance. And yeah, we've heard news out of China recently. It's essentially a price war going on for electric cars, where the prices are dropping and there's a lot of competition, and to the point where the Chinese government is concerned that the prices are dropping too much. And,
they're sending warnings out.
Yeah, and we've heard this before about solar panel manufacturers, right? Like there's such competition that the prices drop so much for solar panels, then suddenly the companies making them that are, used to be profitable may not be. So, it's all a tricky thing. Yes, high oil prices are good because that, drives people to burn less oil. But, all these things grow and fluctuate with each other, and it's hard to know for sure exactly how they're going to play out against each other.
So that's breaking news on Tuesday when we're recording. We usually record on Tuesdays. If you want to get the podcast right on Tuesdays, you can join our Patreon and as a paying member and get that practically live. But also today, Brian, is the new Nissan Leaf. And why are we interested in that? There's lots of cars now. We used to talk about it a lot because there was only a handful. You could count them on your nose hairs, like they were just a few of them.
Yeah, and James has a 2013 Nissan Leaf, which he would love to upgrade. But yeah, the Leaf was the very first mainstream electric car. For years, it was the top-selling electric car.
From 2010.
And Nissan,
end of 2010.
From 2010. Nissan really broke ground on this, but of course they've been faltering. They've been slow to replace the Leaf and so on and so forth. So, finally the new Leaf is here.
And initial reviews are good. It's got a NACS port, which means the Tesla style, smaller, easy to use port for fast charging. But then it's got a different port for charging at home or hotels or, slow level 2 charging.
Oh, interesting.
And it's got a different port on the other side because they said the NACS port came too late in the development and they couldn't get suppliers. Normally, what you would do is you would have that NACS port used not only for fast charging, but also at home, like you would on your Tesla. You use the same port for fast charging or at home. It just switches things in the car. So that's a bit of a weird thing, but probably good for people who are upgrading and already have a charger at home. If you're a Nissan Leaf fan and you're sticking with the brand, that's one way to go. I can't get a read on how size different it is, if it is different. It's got lots of cargo space. It does look like a raised sedan. It doesn't look like a 2 SUV-ish, but it is. It's a small SUV. It's probably, I would say for me, the perfect size car. Like it's just enough to have lots of backroom space if I take my grown kids somewhere, or if my partner puts in child seats for her work as a social worker, or the cargo space at the back is pretty good too, and the legroom in the back is really good. So, yeah, it's got 2 different battery sizes, but it only charges at 150 kilowatts. And I find that a bit frustrating.
Yeah.
This day and age, charging at 150 kilowatts max. they did say, you can get, like 3 hours of driving in 30 minutes. But I don't know. It's just, I was looking at the review from Out of Spec, and they were showing how it has, route planning. You can say, I want to go here, and it'll tell you where to stop and how long you'll have to stop there to charge. And some of them were short, but most of them were almost an hour and a half. And that's no good. That's no good now.
Yeah.
That's what my Bolt would have to do. And it's a bigger battery in this car, and maybe the route is not ideal. But those are using almost all Tesla chargers too, which are capable of fast. Most of them are capable of faster than that car can take. So it's not an issue of speed. Yeah, I don't know about that, but they do have, up to 600 kilometers of range in the larger battery, which is really ample even for a cold climate like us. And I think about all you need. And they're advertising it as saying, you can charge it. A road trip of 800 kilometers or more would be about the same time as a gas car. But I don't know if that's true after looking at that. The big thing about it is you have battery preconditioning, manual or automatic. The base model doesn't come with navigation, so you can't, do the pre-planning of your route. You'd have to do it on your app and your phone. But you can manually preheat, which is really EV forward for Nissan, considering they've had some issues with that. So you can just, if you live in an apartment and you want to go off to your local fast charger and charge, you can, preheat it from the car or the app maybe. And then the battery gets warm enough to accept a fast charge. And it uses a little bit of its own power to do that, but it's worth it. It looks great. It doesn't look funny. There's no funny business going on. It looks fantastic.
Yep.
I'm tending to prefer the Chinese styling, exterior styling, to the Japanese styling these days. But I haven't seen any Chinese cars in person, so it's hard to say. But I have seen, of course, a lot of the Japanese cars around. Whether it's too little, too late, it's hard to say. Nissan is struggling. And, you might have an option. We'll see how cheap the car is. It damn well better be cheap if they're having such slow charging, right?
Yeah.
But it would work as an Uber very well. It would work for ride sharing and for somebody who gets a very low lease. However, some of those leases that we've mentioned on the show for like $20 a month, some of those new cars are bricked. The out-of-spec people that they know, they had like 3. One they had and 2 of their friends were bricked. That means they don't work. They just stop working.
Yeah, well, you talked about this a few months ago on the show, that there were really, really cheap leases on the existing Leafs. But I guess for some reason they're dead?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I haven't heard any official Auto News reporting on that. But there's some sort of issue going on. And this Leaf, you can pre-order it in the fall of this year and get it spring of next year. So it's still a year away before you will see them on the streets. But it is a great looking car. They're trying to meet all the needs of a person to say, okay, there's no excuses. Go electric and get this car. But having said that, I don't know. It's still a premium to get faster charging these days, which is a bit of a surprise to me. And it's somewhat true for Chinese cars, but less true, I would say. So we'll see where that goes in the next couple of years. I have a feeling the battery chemistries that they're using and everything will change, and you can do a better job getting a faster charging car, because it has to do with the voltage in the battery and how much they can accept.
Yeah. Well, we're looking forward to more cars here in North America. The progress still seems to be a bit slow, and the prices are still too high compared to what's happening in China and other places. So I guess we'll see. All right, so a couple of stories here from The Guardian. Banks increased funding for fossil fuels in 2024. A total of $869 billion was pledged to fossil fuel firms in 2024. That was up $162 billion from the previous year, when we all know that we all have to stop financing new fossil fuel projects. I mean, we still need oil. We have to admit that, even here at the Clean Energy Show. But we should stop building any new oil and just work with the oil we've got, as we need to obviously slowly wind it down. And the more we build, the harder that's going to be. So there's a report here compiled by a coalition of 8 green groups that shows that the amount loaned by big banks to fossil fuels had been declining in 2021. But then there was a reversal last year 2/3 of the world's largest 65 banks increased their funding $162 billion in 2024 based on 2023. So that's unfortunate. 4 of the 5 largest fossil fuel financiers last year were American companies: JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citigroup, Japanese bank, Mizuho Financial was 4th, and then Wells Fargo. So 4 American banks and a Japanese bank. In total, $7.9 trillion has been financed in fossil fuels since the Paris Accord, which is a very unacceptably large number.
Well, we can be discerning in what banks we choose. There is activism around to choose a bank that doesn't support fossil fuels. Here in Canada, we have, 4 major Canadian banks or something like that?
Yeah.
Plus some credit unions. Well, they're all fossil fuel happy these days. And it seems like as soon as Trump got into office, everyone said, climate's out the window. None of that anymore. We want to make money.
Yeah. And I'm with RBC, which is a bank I do not like.
Oh, God. They're my most hated bank in Canada.
Oh, but the other ones aren't much better. So it's like, well, why would I go to all this trouble to switch to one of the other awful banks?
That's the first bank we went to for our first mortgage. And they I think I was doing contract work. So it was just in my wife's name. And they laughed at her and said, you won't be able to afford a lawnmower if you'll be house poor. Well, we went to a different bank, got the mortgage, got into housing, still in it, made a lot of money off the first house, and we had 3 lawnmowers because everyone gave us lawnmowers. So for years, we had more lawnmowers than we knew what to do with, and we had no room for them. So I don't know. I just didn't care for them. I understand you shouldn't be mortgage happy and, give out mortgages to people who can't afford them. But we could clearly afford it. And, it's worked out well for us. And we're not renting anymore.
Yeah. Well, I have a long list of complaints about RBC and the other banks, but we better move on here. So, and then there's a slightly better news story here also from The Guardian. The Inter-American Development Bank is looking to reverse that trend of banks financing fossil fuels. The IABD provides financing of various kinds to the developing world. They are based in the U.S. And here's from The Guardian. An innovative plan to use public money to back renewable energy loans in the developing world could liberate cash from the private sector for urgently needed climate finance. The plan could drive tens of billions of new investment in the fledgling green economy in poorer countries within a few years and could provide the bulk of the $1.3 trillion in annual climate finance that was promised to the developing world by 2035. We know providing money to the developing world is a big part of helping to fix climate change. So it goes on here. Research seen by The Guardian, carried out by the campaign group Oil Change International, shows that many developed countries are still planning to expand their extraction of oil and gas, despite promising at COP28 to transition away from fossil fuels. The analysis found that in the U.S., Canada, Norway, and Australia, they were responsible for 70% of projected new oil and gas expansion over the next 10 years. So, as we just discussed, we have to stop expanding oil and gas, but we are continuing to do it with countries like the U.S. and Canada leading the way. The plan, which is being pioneered by the IADB, would involve getting taxpayer-funded development banks to buy existing loans in green projects in poor countries, which would free up investments from the private sector. Such loans are relatively low risk because they're already performing, but because they're in developing countries with credit ratings lower than those of rich countries, mainstream private sector investors such as pension funds are often forbidden from touching them because of strict rules on credit worthiness. But if these loans are backed instead by development banks, they can provide guarantees against default, which they themselves have an impeccable credit rating. So these can then be repackaged as better loans to meet the private sector criteria. So yeah, it's a way to use these development banks to back the loans that are already in place, which we know that, renewable energy projects are generally good investments, but because they're in developing nations, they tend to have a strike against them in terms of their credit worthiness.
I'm a little bit cynical on this. I think but I think that it'll be cyclical. I think it'll come back around where banks will be held to account and be shamed as much as possible, and then they'll there'll be a choice of banks to choose from as a consumer that doesn't necessarily support fossil fuel expansion. However, in oil-rich countries like us, it's like hard to have a bank that does that, because then half the country will get angry and think that you're woke. And yeah, but climate change is a thing, and it's certainly affecting us where we live here right now, because it is dry and warm, and the snow melted instantly. It didn't have a chance to, pool. It went right away and evaporated, and the forests are dry, and they're saying the forest fires here are going to burn until snowfall, and there's just no stopping them. So that's great news. I will say, I didn't point out that we got very clean air, though, recently.
Yeah.
If you want to monitor our air, you could go on our Patreon page and see the link to our IQ Air page, where we have live hourly reports. So I sort of coordinate that with the weather forecast comes at the top of the hour as well. So I can see, okay, so everybody's reading is this at the top of the hour, and the wind at the airport was this direction. So I can sort of correlate all that. I'm a data nerd now, more so than before even, and looking at that. But yeah, I did learn that landfills have particulate pollution, and they are 5 or 6 kilometers north of the CKCK monitoring station. They have the same station I do. A lot of the stations are purple air, which are cheaper and not necessarily calibrated as well to the American Air Quality Index standard, because there's sort of a mathematical multiplier you have to go through to get there. So you'll see lower numbers on a lot of the stations that are purple air. But CKCK, the TV station, has the same air monitor as the Clean Energy Show, so we can make direct comparisons to that. I actually drove by there because my wife was in Costco across the street for a while, and a long while, actually. A lost feeling in my butt. But I went over there to look, and I couldn't see it anywhere. So I don't know if it's on the tower or if it's in the back of the building. I didn't want to be too... Yeah. There's not a lot of activity because only 3 people work there now compared to the 250 in the 80s. But yeah, I didn't want to be creepy. Yeah, I used to work there in the early 90s for a while, but they won't remember me. Yeah, so I didn't want to be creepy, but I did drive around the parking lot and I couldn't see it anywhere. But yeah, led me to wonder, do landfills emit pollution in the particulate sense of pollution, like PM 2.5? Our air quality monitor here monitors down to PM 1 and also PM 2.5 and PM 10. And those are different things, but the biggest pollution one is usually 2.5. So these landfills, which is... It's about, I would say, roughly 4 or so kilometers east of me.
Yeah.
So it's on the other side of the refinery. It's the refinery is between me and it, although the refinery is a little bit offset, so the wind direction wouldn't be the same. But maybe if I have a certain wind, it won't be the refinery. If I don't smell the refinery and I see my numbers go up, it could be the landfill. And by the way, I haven't smelled the refinery much at all in this area. Tonight, we're looking at variable winds. So that means that you get a little waft of air from this direction, a little waft of air from that direction. And that's usually bad news for breathing the refinery, because usually at some point, you'll see all the refinery sort of move over in this direction. But it's not particularly stinky. I don't know what that means. I can only speculate, but it could mean that there are times where they dump pollution where it's really bad, because the book refers to fugitive emissions and things like that. Yeah. So it's hard to tell, or it could be a different part of their process. But I drove by downwind from it, and it wasn't as bad as it has been at sometimes. I haven't heard about them improving anything. I would hope that they do, because that book certainly shamed them, but it didn't get a lot of press either. So the people who live near landfills, it's a daily exposure to a cocktail of airborne pollutants, some of them invisible, and all of them potentially harmful. The air around landfills can carry methane, carbon dioxide, volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, and particulate matter like PM10 and PM 2.5. So I'll be on the lookout for that. Very cool that I can be on the lookout for such things and have that measured. These pollutants don't just smell bad. They can cause serious health issues, from respiratory problems and asthma to cardiovascular and even neurological impacts, just like the refinery. Refinery can cause neurological impacts. A lot of the pollution comes from how the landfill operates. When organic waste, like food scraps, starts breaking down, it goes through both aerobic and anaerobic decomposition. In the absence of oxygen, that anaerobic process creates methane and CO2, two major greenhouse gases, and then sulfur-containing waste. You get hydrogen sulfide, a toxic gas that smells like rotten eggs. That also comes out of the refinery. So it's wondering, I may not know who the emitter is, because it could be the landfill as well, though I've never consciously smelled the landfill. And I've been to the landfill many times, and I haven't smelled it. They cover it with dirt, and, I'm sure the worst part is the worst part. If the landfill's not properly covered, it does allow gases and particles to drift freely. Heavy machinery, trucks hauling garbage in and out, and even combustion from burning waste or fossil fuels. All of this releases CO2, nitrogen oxides, and particulate matter, and we're concerned about the particulate matter. If you've got a perfect storm of airborne contaminants just swirling around where people live, that's bad. So even when there's nothing moving, though, landfills still emit pollutants. Chemical reactions between water, air, and waste can create methane and ammonia. Physical processes like compaction and heat from decomposition release volatile compounds into the air. And it's constant, Brian. It doesn't stop. For nearby communities, which are often lower income or marginalized neighborhoods, this means 24/7 exposure to these pollutants. So it's a public health crisis in plain sight. Apparently there are solutions, though. Some landfills are installing advanced detection systems that monitor gas emissions in real time. It can even capture methane before it escapes, which I think they're trying to generate a little bit of electricity from the methane from our landfill.
Is that
if I'm
right?
not mistaken.
Yeah, I know that is a thing that is sometimes done.
And we need policies that mandate proper gas capture, regular monitoring, which is something the refinery doesn't do outside their fence line, and better landfill design. So that is an issue that sometimes comes up on our show. We were talking about one in California recently. So, yeah, that's just something to be on the lookout for. And something I hadn't thought about is a landfill being a polluter beyond greenhouse gases, but actually to people's health.
Yeah, particulate matter coming from a landfill. That was a bit surprising to me. All right, looks like it's time to dip into the mailbag. Good morning, gentlemen. I wanted to pass along a unique event we at the Electric Vehicle Council of Ottawa helped with this past weekend here in Ottawa. Last year, we pitched replacing the loud and polluting generators that powered the inflatable attractions with EVs. We made it a reality this year with 2 Ford F-150 Lightnings and a GMC Sierra EV loaned to us by a few local dealers. The 3 trucks worked about 25 hours each over the 3 days, with only the Lightning's smaller batteries needing a top-up on Saturday night. And they've posted some pictures on the website. That's evco.ca if anybody wants to have a look. Cheers and keep up the good work. That is from Ryan, the director of EVCO.
And we're talking about like large kids things like slides and bouncy castles.
Yeah,
and
bouncy
things
castles.
that require constant air pump blowing air in. And instead of using generators, they've used EVs, which I'm sure could power them for 25 hours, he says. So
yeah, well, with more vehicles like the Ford F-150 Lightning around, which is really, made for that. It's made for work sites. It's made to pump out electricity from the battery. This is a no-brainer. This is fantastic. And I'm sure there's many, many events around the world that could do the same thing, replace those small diesel generators with an EV.
And by the way, the Leaf, the highest trim model that they were showing had a normal outlet, like a 120 volt North American power outlet where you could plug something into. And they said that, I don't know if you need an adapter for higher loads, but it will do 3,000 vehicle to load. And the vehicle to load means the vehicle's battery to whatever you use directly from the vehicle. Or it could go to your house during a power outage. You wouldn't even need any special equipment. You could run an extension cord to your Leaf and power a fridge during a power outage, or a freezer or something like that, or a couple of things, and still it's cool. And I think it's one of those advantages that is an EV has, and you don't have to run it for very long.
Yeah, and it wasn't one of those things that people were even necessarily thinking of when first switching to EVs, but it's just one of those things where once the technology is out there in the world, these other uses become very much apparent.
So the original Nissan Leaf had a big device you could buy for your house, kind of like Ford has for their F-150.
Yeah.
You have an electrician install it, and it powers your house. But that only happened in Japan, but it was a capability of the Leaf.
Yeah.
A leaf, rather. Here's another letter. It says, "Hi, Brian and James. Every week I look forward to your show. Sadly, this week there was a bit too much Canada here in Switzerland for our liking. During my hike on Monday, the air was visibly smoggy from the Canadian wildfires. And I can't imagine how bad it must be for you." Well, it wasn't that much worse for the pictures. It's shockingly bad. The mountains of Switzerland, like this is from Timo, and he lives in a smaller center and very beautiful center. And, they're getting wildfire smoke fairly heavily from Canada. My son didn't believe this when I told him that. And I said, the Swiss media is covering it. They talk to meteorologists and they have maps and they can show the smoke going across the ocean. We talked about it hitting the UK, but it's hit Switzerland, for God's sake, which is, I'm not a geographic engineer, Brian, but that's halfway around the world, as far as I know. That's a pretty long distance to screw up Timo's hike.
No, the pictures are surprising from Switzerland because it looks similar to what it is around here on a good day. It hasn't been awful every single day, and like you say, the last several days the wind has been good and the air quality has come back. But yeah, those pictures from Switzerland look like sort of a medium day for us here in Canada.
Yeah, and that's terrible because it's bad for your health and it's bad. It wrecks the view, the scenery of the mountains, the beautiful Swiss mountains and valleys and everything. Timo continues, on another note, you have talked a few times about electric trucks on your show, and he's talking about like transport trucks. There is a great YouTuber in Germany who is a long-haul trucker who uses all kinds of different brands and shows that it is already possible to drive through the whole of Europe without a time loss compared to diesel trucks, which is pretty remarkable. One of his tours took him from Germany to the south of Spain. The equivalent for you would be Regina, Toronto. Thank you, Timo, for giving us a equivalent that we can think about. I don't know what that is for Americans. Maybe Denver to New York almost.
Yeah, something like that.
He manages this without megawatt chargers, just regular CCS chargers that charge up to 400 kilowatts. So this is not the megawatt chargers that China is making kind of standardized and would be suitable for trucks, but just 400. So maybe you don't even need that much infrastructure because 400 is kind of like the new standard for highway car charging, fast charging now. It's kind of frequently you see that standard. So here are two videos I can recommend. They are in German, but the auto-translate or subtitles work pretty well. And this is the electric truck convoy to Switzerland, or to Sweden, pardon me. And I'm going to play this live.
That I can now be on the road with the Polar Express, and I'll just finish it up quickly now.
So that is the
I'm
translated voice.
I'm allowed to be on the road with it for 3 weeks now. A really nice tractor unit in that lovely gray.
And this is the original voice.
Ich merke gerade, die Schilder müssen noch rein, das Elektro-Tracker-Schild. Und ich habe jetzt, das ist schon krass, wenn man jetzt natürlich auch ganz mal gewerblich damit unterwegs ist.
I mean, that's pretty impressive. And the reason why I bring it up, Brian, is because we got a notice from our YouTube channel that we can do this soon. So we'll have that option of translating, which is exciting to me, but it's still early days, and you can hear him going, really loud every 3 seconds in some parts of that video, but in the English translation. But we're very close to allowing them to clone our voices and be able to put, because we can put our podcast, it is on YouTube as audio and a video podcast. The video podcast is shorter, but the audio podcast is there, and people YouTube's pushing audio podcasts and video podcasts, and so is Spotify pushing video podcasts. But yeah, we'll be able to reach the world. I mean, we are around the world except for China, for example.
Yeah.
It's really weird to get into China, but I imagine one day we'll be able to if we want to. You have to show your passports on an image to get into China to put your podcast there. It's really weird.
Really?
Yeah, wow. It was a very surreal, strange process when I looked it up. So yeah, there's also, he has a video on the top 10 battery electric construction machines, which is becoming a thing now. And he says, my local trucking company in Frauenfeld also already has 28 fast charger spots for trucks. So that's quite a few. And they have more than 30 electric trucks in use. So these trucks are transport trucks that are doing long haul transportation. And we're very close with battery improvements and everything like that to, I don't think hydrogen trucks are ever going to be a thing. We've said that for a long time because it's a lot easier to put in a charger than it is a hydrogen station and truck the hydrogen there and compress it and make it green hydrogen as well.
Yeah, and with everything being denser in Europe, everything's a little closer together. The highway infrastructure is very well developed. The charging infrastructure is very well developed. Here in North America, we still have vast expanses that we sometimes have to cover, but it would make sense that this kind of electric trucking would take off in Europe first.
Thank you, Timo from Switzerland. We appreciate your letter. Thanks for taking the time. And everyone else, we'd love to hear from you. Contact us at Clean Energy Show, all one word, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. You can leave us a voicemail online at speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow and join the conversation on our Patreon page and get access to additional content. And you can drop us messages there and comments, and we'll read them for sure.
Okay, a story here from Electrek. We've talked a lot about solar canopy projects over the last couple of years, and I just always love these kinds of projects because it shows that there's more than one benefit from solar panels. There's more than one use for solar panels, and you end up with a clean energy system that is overall better. Like, it's not any kind of a hindrance or a pain in the ass to go solar. You end up with a better system in the end. So this is the city of Pendleton, Oregon, and they just opened up their new solar canopy at the wastewater treatment plant. So it's not a huge project. It's 240 kilowatts, and it goes over the Pendleton Wastewater Treatment and Resource Recovery Facility, and they're expecting it to generate about 325,000 kilowatt hours annually. That's about 30% of what the facility uses, so it doesn't cover everything. But the superintendent said the solar canopy not only helps reduce our energy costs and environmental footprint, but it also enhances the performance of our wastewater treatment facility in ways that benefit the entire community. The new canopy does more than generate clean power. It shades the facility's chlorine contact chamber, which helps cool down the water, improve effluent quality, and support a healthier aquatic ecosystem. It's a smart pairing of infrastructure and sustainability. The funding comes from state grants, the Oregon Department of Energy, and other utility incentives, city resources, and they already have plans to put in battery storage there as well.
All right, let's talk about Nepal. This is from Clean Technica, and it's a country you probably wouldn't think about we'd be talking about for EVs. It's a beautiful mountainous nation, Nepal. It is making an ambitious leap, though, not just catching up with electric vehicles revolution that's going on, but leapfrogging over fossil fuel dependence entirely.
Wow.
It's saying, no, we don't need gas. We're going from non-fossil fuel transportation to electrified. So that's the way to go. Just like some countries are going from landlines they're skipping landlines and going to cell phones because it's just easier that way, now that the access is coming to them. And they're doing it with hydropower, lots of it. Nepal generates nearly all of its electricity, around 98% from hydropower. And that makes it one of the cleanest grids in the world. And instead of building a fossil fuel transport system first, then trying to electrify it like most countries, Nepal is skipping straight to EVs. And you're seeing electric buses replacing diesel ones in Kathmandu. And even those iconic tuk-tuks, they're going electric too. And they're going to be cleaner and quieter, of course, and healthier transportation. You don't have to breathe the stink, the bad things that we're talking about more often on this show. It's a country that has suffered from deadly air pollution and expensive fuel imports for years because a lot of countries that don't have fossil fuel, not only they have them themselves for mining it, but also refining. Some countries have it, but they can't refine it, and they get stuck, like Ethiopia, which said, enough, we have our own gas, but we can't refine it. Goes away, comes back really expensive, and they banned new fossil fuel cars from coming into the country. And the ambition goes even further in Nepal. They want to electrify not just vehicles, but cooking too. And they want to do this by 2030. If successful, this would cut emissions drastically and improve health outcomes, especially for women who traditionally cook with wood or gas in the country. There are challenges. Charging infrastructure is still developing. Big deal. If you got hydro up the yang, you can put up some chargers. I don't care. It's not that big of a deal. The electric vehicles are expensive for many in Nepal, but there's political will, and even more importantly, there's public buy-in. The shift is already visible in the streets. Nepal shows that what's possible when clean electricity is the foundation. They don't just have a huge economy for sprawling cities. They don't have a huge economy or sprawling cities, but what they do have is a vision for a cleaner and self-reliant future, which is encouraging when people do this, and they have the courage to go for it, and some countries don't. But the buy-in is big, and that's an important part of the story here. And it's not just innovation, it's a story of resilience, adaptation, and smart planning. With its rugged terrain in Nepal, modest resources, and complex geography, if they can make this kind of leap, Brian, well, who can't? Because, it just takes some will and some buy-in.
Yeah.
And this is a good news story.
And adding fossil fuel infrastructure isn't going to be any easier. So, Yeah, why bother? That's an excellent, excellent story.
Join our Patreon today as a paying member and get access to our exclusive Patreon episodes, which come out once a month. You can now support us for as little as $1 a month, thanks to our new members this week, Noah, Mike, Oscar, Pierre, and Stu. Quite the sausage party there, Brian.
Yeah.
I blame you. You and your sausage. It's all your fault. Thanks to all who support our show. Coming up next is the lightning round.
Want to make a difference in your community but not sure how? Go to GoFundMe.com right now and start a GoFundMe. Seriously. Your next fundraiser doesn't have to start in a school parking lot or a church basement. You can start a GoFundMe today in just minutes. Fundraise for yourself, a friend, or family member, or an organization. All that matters is that you care about them. GoFundMe is the trusted place to fundraise for what you care about. With no pressure to hit your fundraising goal, but tons of tools to help you reach it, you can confidently start fundraising right now. Whether it's creative, local, or critical, your cause matters. And there's a reason why GoFundMe is backed by millions and chosen by fundraisers everywhere. It works, and it matters. GoFundMe helps you make a real difference. Start your GoFundMe today at GoFundMe.com. That's GoFundMe.com. GoFundMe.com. This is a commercial message brought to you by GoFundMe.
Hi, I'm Richard Karn, and you may have seen me on TV talking about the world's #1 expandable garden hose. Well, the brand new Pocket Hose Copperhead with Pocket Pivot is here, and it's a total game changer. Old-fashioned hoses get kinks and creases at the spigot, but the Copperhead's Pocket Pivot swivels 360 degrees for full water flow and freedom to water with ease all around your home. When you're all done, this rust-proof anti-burst hose shrinks back down to pocket size for effortless handling and tidy storage. Plus, your super light and ultra-durable Pocket Hose Copperhead is backed with a 10-year warranty. What could be better than that? I'll tell you what, an exciting exclusive offer just for you. For a limited time, you can get a free Pocket Pivot and their 10-pattern sprayer with the purchase of any size Copperhead hose. Just text WATER to 64,000. That's WATER to 64,000 for your 2 free gifts with purchase. WATER to 64,000.
By texting 64,000, you agree to receive recurring automated marketing messages from Pocket Hose. Message and data rates may apply. No purchase required. Terms apply. Available at pockethose.com/terms.
It's time for the lightning
The
round.
Lightning Round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy and transportation.
Global EV car sales are up 24% in May compared to the same period last year. UK EV car sales as of May are already higher than the total of all last year.
Wow.
So that's an impressive upswing in Britain and surrounding countries. In the UK, in 2022, Ukraine thwarted a Russian attack on Kiev by flooding a nearby river valley. To guard against future Russian aggression, scientists are calling for restoring hundreds of miles of wetlands along Europe's eastern flank to keep the Ruskies out and to restore those wetlands. In 2025, solar output is 32% higher than gas output. 2025.
Yeah.
Gas output has dropped 41.4%, and solar output has raised 50% in the last 2 years. And battery output has also risen 215%. Research from Bloomberg Intelligence says that Tesla's vehicles cost 1/7 of Waymo's. That report on Bloomberg is very controversial, though, and it's getting a lot of pushback from people who, have given, they're giving a lot of credit to Tesla's self-driving capability right now that maybe isn't due. This is time for a CS Fast Fact. In 2018, 80% of China's EVs ran on nickel, cobalt, magnesium, NCM, lithium-ion batteries. That's a mouthful. But today, less than 20% do. You know why that's important? It's because we're not using nickel, which is expensive, cobalt, which is expensive. Yeah. So, and it's hard and unethical in some places, in the Congo and so forth. Well, only 20% do. And I hear this from people like my hairdresser all the time. And, it's just it's not the case. Things are changing, and you can't even use that argument anymore. India's coal-fired power is down 9.5% May on an annual basis. That is in the month of May this year compared to last year, marking the sharpest year-on-year decline ever, excluding COVID. It's a caveat. Because renewables surged to a record high, up 17.2% from a year earlier. They're already pretty darn high to reach the highest share of power generation ever, and that story is from Reuters. Waymo now has a quarter of the rideshare market in San Francisco, nearly half of Uber's volume. Chinese solar giant LONGi unveiled a new 700-watt solar panel with 25.9% module level efficiency. Do you know how many watts the solar panels on your roof are? I think mine are about 280.
Yeah, mine are, something like that, 280, something like that.
Something like that. I can't remember, but ours probably have an efficiency of 20% or less.
Yeah.
So this same panel, well, for one panel would produce, twice the power and then some. And the efficiency of it is a lot higher. So it's to be 6% over the lifetime. That's a lot more electricity. And it's more than 6% because the module efficiency is like a quarter higher than the older ones. So we're starting to see the price is a question too. They're probably more expensive, but they're not as expensive as they would be. So they're actually making more power with more per panel, and they might cost a bit more, but they don't cost as much as the extra power you get from them.
Yeah.
So these are back contact solar cells known for high efficiency and compatibility. They have led efficiency rankings since SunPower's 20.3% record in 2007. Now, panels that were made in 2007 and put up around the world were not anywhere near 20.3%. They were probably 16, 17, 18% at best for years to come after that. But yeah, these panels are largely one large black surface. There's not these little cells and modules you see inside them. World Bank lifts a ban on funding nuclear energy. The last time the World Bank approved a nuclear energy electricity project was 6 decades ago. Since then, the World Bank and other multilateral development banks had completely stopped supporting nuclear. So Geely's AE200 is one of those eVTOL things that take off vertically with electric power and batteries and then move forward. They're like a drone/helicopter for people. And they are going to be the first eVTOL to get an airworthiness certificate and realize commercial operation. So this is Geely's a car company in China, and they're making these things that will take off, and they're going to be able to give you rides.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty crazy world, that. But I don't want these things flying over my house. I already got the police plane cruising over my house constantly.
Yes, so close to the Jetsons' future of flying around.
So the idea is to take people from like Manhattan to JFK.
Yeah.
In a fraction of the time of pretty cheaply, like $50 for a trip somewhere.
All right. And that is the show for this week. You can contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. On social media, we're Clean Energy Pod. And find us, please, on patreon.com/cleanenergypod. We also have a merch store, and you can buy some hats and t-shirts and so forth. And remember to hit the follow or subscribe button and get new episodes every week.
And those links are in your show notes. Thanks to all of our Patreon Clean Club executive members, Green Bastard Brent Rowley, who get a shout out every week. Thank you to all who are supporting our climate positive content. We'll see you again in 7 days.
See you next week.